Hello and welcome to another motorcycling video. This is Roger. I haven't done any motorcycle videos for a little while, not because I haven't been riding my bike, but because I am the world's worst cameraman and I either forget to put the camera on, or as was the case this morning, I put the camera on the bike with the intention of filming the outward journey from Cromer to Curl, as well as the return journey, and set off ready to do that, and realised about halfway through the outward journey that I had forgotten to press the record button. Now, of course, I could have pulled over and done that, but I decided not to, since you would have missed part of the ride. And so I've only filmed the return journey, and I have approximately 10 minutes left to tell you what it is that I want to tell you and what I want to talk about. So first of all, I apologise for, again, being the world's worst cameraman. But nevertheless, the return journey, I hope, is interesting to look at while you listen to me talk. This video is based on some information I found from another motorcycle vlogger. His channel is called MC Rider, and he's a motorcycle instructor, belongs to the Motorcycle Safety Foundation, which is the accrediting body for motorcycle trainers in the United States. And if I remember, I will put a link to his channel in the description. He talked about 3 things not to do or to consider or to remember when you're parking your bike, and I feel as if they are 3 things that are worth knowing and remembering, so I'm going to recount them. I don't think I'm stealing his material. I just think I'm replaying it or retelling the story from with an Australian voice for the people who watch my channel. And he hasn't asked me to do this, and I'm not paid to do it. I just do it because I think it's interesting. So there are 3 things that he says you should know and should remember when you park your bike. The first of these, I should start again and say that we assume that people know these things, and maybe we assume that they're just common sense things, but we should never assume, I should never assume, I should say, that people know these things, and I should never assume that common sense exists, because we see things all the time where common sense doesn't exist. So anyway, the first of these pieces of advice is that when you park your bike, especially if it's on a slope of any sort, make sure the stand is down properly first of all. That seems obvious, and on firm ground rather than soft mud or something like that, and then make sure you leave your bike in gear. Now, the reason for that is that bikes can occasionally fall off the stand, or gravity doing its work. If you're on a slope where the bike is sloping backwards down a hill, for example, gravity will do its work, and the bike might roll back down the hill. So putting it in first gear acts like an extra sort of parking brake to prevent that happening. Now, you might think, well, that never happens to me and I've never seen it happen to anybody else, but in the video that MC Rider made, he had an example where a bloke came into a parking spot. The parking spot sloped upwards as he rode into it, so he kicked down the stand, got off his bike, walked away, and 30 seconds later the bike rolled back down the slope and fell over. It's a very big cruiser, so I'm suggesting it was probably 300, 400 kilos, and getting those things up off the stand in the first place is pretty hard, but certainly trying to pick one up when it's lying down on its side is very, very difficult. I know I couldn't do it. I used to have a Kawasaki Vulcan Voyager, which was close to 400 kilos, and I know I just couldn't pick it up if it fell over. It was a 2-person operation. So that's hint number 1. Now, of course, if you have a scooter with a CVT transmission or a CV transmission, then mostly those things go straight into gear anyway. When you twist the throttle, you go. But some of the bigger scooters, the Bergman 650, for example, and the Yamaha T-Max as another one, they have a parking brake, or what we call in a car in Australia a handbrake. And it's a good idea to use that just as a second safety thing to make sure the bike doesn't roll off its stand. So if your bike doesn't have a parking brake, and I'll come to that again in a moment, make sure when it goes on the stand, you put it in gear. If it has a parking brake, make sure you use the parking brake. Now, my bike, I now have a Can-Am Spyder 2012 RT Limited, and they do have an electronic parking brake. So when you park the brake, you can leave the bike in gear, park the bike, I beg your pardon, you can leave the bike in gear, and you can then, of course, put on the parking brake. In fact, if you don't put the parking brake on, there'll be a beeping noise that'll go on for what seems like an interminable period of time to remind you to do it. Now, the second thing is, second tip he gave is also to do with parking, and it depends a little bit on the place where you live. In the city of Goulburn in New South Wales, where I live, they have angle parking in the main street. And angle parking requires that you park nose into the curb. Curb being K-E-R-B in this case, not C-U-R-B as in curb your enthusiasm. But so you're required to park nose in. And for cars, that's pretty easy. And for bikes, that's pretty easy. You just drive in. Of course, you've got to reverse out, and that's where the problem comes. Now, in a car, just put your car in reverse. Most have got reversing cameras these days, and little screens to show you what's happening behind you and all that sort of stuff. But with a bike, especially a big, heavy cruiser, it is almost impossible to duck walk or crab walk, whatever expression you use, those bikes out of a sloped parking area. If the parking on the side of the road is following the camber of the road, in other words, the peak of the road, and the road slopes away so the water will run off it and into the gutter, your nose is going to be down at the gutter. Now, most of the weight of most bikes is either underneath or in front of the rider. The engine is either underneath the rider or in front of the rider. So most of the weight of the engine is over the front wheels. So trying to walk that bike backwards out of a parking space like that is very, very difficult, if not impossible. I know again that I could not do that with my Kawasaki Voyager, and before that I had a Yamaha XB 1100, and it was also quite difficult to walk that out of backwards. When I had to park in the main street on either of those bikes, I always parked rear in. Technically, I could have been fined for parking incorrectly, but I never was. But if the parking inspector or ranger or whatever they're called decided to be nasty, they could have fined me for parking incorrectly. But if you do just nose into the parking space, you're going to find it extremely difficult to get out. Now, in the case of the Honda Goldwing, and I think one of the Indians, maybe one of the Harley Davidsons now, they do have a reverse gear, so you can reverse your way out. And in the case of the Spyders, and the Rikers also, they also have a reverse gear, so you can reverse your way out. But even with sports bikes, it's very difficult to do that. And I should say, with the Suzuki Bergman scooter that I have, it's the 650, and it's about 220 kilos. If the slope is quite steep into the parking space and you're trying to walk out of, again, it is quite difficult to do that. So if you have the opportunity, reverse yourself in or tail in. I think it's also safer when you're riding out to be tail in, because you can see what's coming as you're riding out. The third point he made was to talk about securing your helmet. I'm very fortunate with my Bergman scooter that the helmet fits under the seat, but if it didn't, they also have a top box to put it in. The Kawasaki, the helmet fit in the top box, and with the Spyder, the helmet fits in the front storage area, or frunk, as some people call it. Some bikes have a hook on the side of the body somewhere, a locking hook, that you can hang the helmet off. But if you just put the helmet on the seat or even on the mirror, you're risking the helmet being either falling off or being blown off or being knocked off. And of course, once that helmet hits the pavement, there's going to be damage to it. Now, you might look at the helmet and find it on the road, not where you left it on your seat or on the mirror, and see no damage on the outside, but it's pretty likely that the inner foam, the inner shell of the helmet has been cracked, and therefore the integrity of the helmet is not what it was, and it's not going to be protecting your head the way it's meant to be. So I guess there are options. One, if you've got under seat storage or top box storage, put your helmet in it. If you don't have that, and you don't have a helmet hook on your thing, then I guess you either have to find like an old bicycle chain with a combination lock or a padlock or something, and padlock somehow your helmet to your bike so that it is already on the ground or already on the footpath, so it won't fall there and won't end up being damaged. Obviously, a new helmet is much more expensive than a small chain and padlock setup. What you do will depend on what sort of, whether you're on a sports bike or a touring bike or whatever it is. But I suppose I sort of knew those things. I never had to worry about the helmet thing because, as I said, I have storage places for them. And I'd always thought about the other two because of big bikes, it is a problem. So there you are, 3 useful tips, I think, for parking your bike, courtesy of MC Rider. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the scenery as you were watching me ride home from Curl Park Run to Cromer on Sydney's northern beaches, and I will talk to you again when I'm making another video, which I hope will be soon. Thanks for watching.